Let's go ahead and get started. My name is Rich Madalino. I have the pleasure of being the Chief Administrative Officer of the Montgomery County Government. We are thrilled today to be before you to announce the County Executive's fiscal year 2027 recommended operating budget. We have a handful of people to introduce. First, we have from our school board president, Grace Rivera Oven, and school board member, Laura Stort. So also from the school system, we have our superintendent, Dr. Thomas Taylor. From Montgomery College, we have the president of the college, Dr. Jermaine Williams. So we could go through a long list of county officials who are here, but recognizing it's 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, I'm going to go through absolutely everybody who is in the room. So, but I do want to take out one special opportunity to give a shout out to Assistant Chief Dave McBain, who is a Richard Montgomery graduate, who is in the back of the room. So, because we normally do such a good job with school construction. He is older than this building. So, and of course, we are thrilled to be in Richard Montgomery High School on the 250th anniversary of the demise of Richard Montgomery, but the creation of Montgomery County, Maryland. So, without further ado, I want to first thank the amazing staff of the Office of Management and Budget for their work. All of you from management and budget, stand up if you would. Oh, come on, Richard Harris, stand up. There you go. Look at this crowd. Thank you. Led by Jenny Bryant, our director. So Faisal Amin, our deputy director, delivering his very first operating budget with Montgomery County. And Rachel Silberman, who's our capital budget coordinator, who was on the hot seat back in January for the presentation. So with that, it's my honor to introduce for his 8th and final recommended budget, our county executive, Mark Elrich. I don't see water.
No,
I want to try to find it.
Yeah. I think I left it in the car or something silly like that. How is everybody? You all good?
Didn't have my story.
I love slanted desks and glasses of water. There's nothing like says you're going to have an accident than those two things together. We'll see what I can do about that. Anyway, thank you all for being here, and I'm glad Rich asked everybody in OMB to stand up. We got really close to each other. I've done 8 of these budgets. I have never spent this long working on a budget. I've never had to have as many meetings to get through something as this, because trying to get the two sides of the equation to balance, which is a basic math problem, except when you're dealing with people and real things, then it gets a lot harder. Trying to get the revenues to match what we needed to spend money on was a real challenge, and it's been probably the hardest. This is the hardest budget I did since the first one I had to do when I walked into the county after I was first elected, and 2 days after I was there, somebody came downstairs and said, "You've got a $50 million hole in this year's budget." And so we started, I spent going page by page to the budget and cutting things out mid-year, which is really painful. And then by the time we got to budget in March, there's another $30 or $40 million that the state said you don't have. And I repeated the exercise of cutting things out. And so that's my worst experience. And this would be the second most difficult experience, because at least I wasn't doing the middle of the year and telling people you're not doing this anymore. This at least we get to make some decisions going forward. We are in challenging times. And I'd say my perspective on this is that when we look at our budget, we had a $45 million snowstorm, which dug into reserves. That money otherwise would have been available for other things in the budget. And then we have Donald Trump, and who is, targeted the state of Maryland and Montgomery County And his actions against us has profound effect on employment in Montgomery County. And just do the numbers. If you lose 15,000 federal workers who average $150,000 a year, that's an awful lot of income tax we're not going to see. And then there are the folks who supported those, the nonprofits, who lost their jobs in an instant. And so we had a real serious impact on our budget, our projections, and we've been doing really well. This is the first administration that ever achieved its reserve targets and exceeded its reserve targets. And our projections have been pretty healthy, but we got to this year, and in December, our projections, what we were going to have, were almost cut in half. And that was reserve money we were counting, that would have been, we were counting on having to balance this budget, and that walked away also. So thank you, Donald. You clearly have good plans, whatever you do. And this has made our lives a lot more difficult. But I feel pretty strongly that, one of the things that they set out and wanted to do was to not only shrink the federal government, but to shrink government in general and shrink the services that government provides for people. And the last thing I was going to do was play into that, because if we had done based on what they had done to our budget, we'd be cutting things and we'd be hurting people. And I thought, people like to say budgets are moral documents. This is like a moral moment. It's either you just say, oh, well, that's what he did, and we're going to cut things and people are going to get hurt, or you're going to say, we're not going to let him change who we are. We're going to continue to work to do things we need to do, and we'll find a way through this. So we have a budget that preserves a lot. It has some cuts. It doesn't have everything I'd like to have in there, but it's a pretty strong budget, and and it funds the school system, everything they asked for. And I will, say that it has been challenging, but I also know that the needs are real, and the problems they have are accumulation of decades of the school system never telling us what they needed fully, and a county council, multiple county councils that would never provide adequate funding to fully fund the budget. When your capital budget was 300 million in 2009, and your capital budget in 2025 is $280 million. Who among you can buy the same thing you bought in 2009 for the same dollars in 2026? The answer is none of you can. Everything goes up, and the fact that we didn't let our capital budgets go up has created a problem that the school system is now having to fill. The fact that we never set our tax rates to equal what it costs to actually operate the government and relied on reserves to balance things meant that if the reserves ever run out, like perhaps they do this year, then you don't have the capacity to actually keep your budget funded. So we've had a bunch of things collide. The school systems knew they wouldn't get money from the county. They didn't ask for stuff they didn't think they were going to get. And then I served on the county 12 years. None of us had an idea of what the school systems actually needed. And so you've got accumulated problems that have now come to a head. So it was my good fortune that I get to deal with it when it's come to a head. But I feel pretty good about where we've gotten, and I think this county will continue to remain strong, and we can be proud of the work we've been able to do. Where are the slides? There they are. So we've made historic investments in education, and we've strengthened our early childhood programs, invested in teachers and classrooms, expanded wraparound supports such as high school wellness centers and mental health centers. We opened Montgomery College, East County Center, first campus on the east side of the county. People talked about this for years. It was a major racial equity issue, that everything was oddly on the west side of the county, except for the original campus in Silver Spring, when Silver Spring was actually the center of the county. No longer true. And everything else was west. And this is the first effort on the east side of the county, and it's going to give kids in the high schools on the east side of the county the same opportunity the kids elsewhere in the county have, is to be dual enrolled in a community college and a high school, and to be able to do that easily. So I'm really happy about that. And I'm really happy that the east side of the county is getting the kind of attention it historically did not get. We've expanded. Those are the East County folks in here. And we expanded a community-based health outreach, providing competent care in neighborhoods that have barriers to services, Program like the Montgomery County Overdose and Crisis Team connect residents in crisis with trained behavioral health professionals who can provide immediate support and pathways to treatment. The expanded emergency shelter, rapid rehousing and prevention programs. One of the things we know is that we're looking at probably increases in homelessness. And we've had a dramatic increase in homelessness over the last year, year and a half. And the reason is during COVID, a lot of people weren't able to pay their rent. They ran up huge backlogs in rent, people with $20,000 in debt. When COVID was over, landlords took a long time to evict people who had back rent. And because the courts were so queued up, it took a long time to work through the eviction process. So they're working through the eviction process now. And low-income people who couldn't afford $20,000 during COVID certainly don't have an extra $20,000 now to pay today's rent plus the back rent. And so we're going to see more people on the streets as these cases go through the courts. And that's unfortunate. We've made a large investment in our teachers and our classrooms. This is, critically important for us. I'm a former teacher, so I know the work you do. Everybody here who you do this work, if you wanted to be high-paid professionals, this is not where you would be. You're here because you care about the kids and you want to make a contribution to society. And this is a place where you can make a meaningful contribution. So I appreciate everything you do to make this possible for people. It really makes a difference. We are continuing to make investments in Montgomery County, growing the economy, because the other way we've got to pay for the thing, you can't do it all with tax increases. My budget has tax increases because I cannot instantly grow the county. You have to make investments to grow the county. And so some of the things we've done, we've created the Institute for Health Computing in the Pike District, Pike and Rose, North Bethesda, whatever name it goes by today. And I always say Whitefoot, and I always get in trouble for that. So I found 3 other names I could call it and still get in trouble. But it's really important. It is graduate level based research where, in a unique way, instead of doing people's pet research projects, which a lot of universities do, they're there to serve the life sciences industry in Montgomery County and provide AI support to companies like AstraZeneca, which has 2 contracts already with the Institute for Health Computing on the research they're doing to find cures for things like breast cancer. So that's been really important for us. We have a Montgomery County Business Center. When I came into office, they created the Economic Development Corporation and dismantled all of the local business support. We put the teams back together. We have people working at the neighborhood level. We've put out a ton of money for incubators and for to companies in startup stages, something we never did before, in order to start generating new businesses and new ideas and helping them grow to life. And that's been really important. We just made a deal with the Henry Jackson Foundation. It's Innovation Labs and a biohub in Maryland. And the Henry M. Jackson Foundation is a military facility, and they specialize in serving our service members. But as we know, our service members are human beings and they suffer from everything that all the rest of us suffer from. So the research they do is beneficial to all of us. And we reached an agreement to create a joint lab together for incubators at that center. So that's another way we're going to help grow businesses into Montgomery County. The Economic Development Corporation is created to attract specialized industries. And we're advancing development of the North Bethesda Metro and Viva White Oak. We signed an agreement with the developer in Viva White Oak. It has taken us God knows how many years to get this done, but we are going to have that place developed. He signed this contract with Costco, which for many people is the most exciting thing in the universe, other than a Wegmans, I believe. I think those two, yeah, I saw the Wegmans nods. So between the two, I don't care about Wegmans, but Costco is more interesting to me. But it is a big deal on the east side of the county, and it's going to make a big difference for the east side of the county. And the Bethesda Metro, Heinz Company is building primarily life sciences building on top of the Metro. And that Institute for Health Computing I talked about is going to be the prime tenant in that first building on top of the Metro. So we're going to try to turn the Metro Center area into the rough equivalent of Cambridge in Boston, where they built an urban life sciences area. We can take between White Flint Mall and where we're going to build on top of the metro, there's enough land for us to build a serious life sciences center and to continue to attract companies there and use the Institute as one of the major attractants. We're also trying to be a greener county. We've made a major commitment to eliminating greenhouse gases. We have implemented building performance standards that new buildings have to make, and it's very strict for them. And older buildings have a path to becoming cleaner. Most of them will not get exactly where we want them to get right away, but they will move in that direction. And everything we can do to reduce greenhouse gases, we're going to do. The county's going to struggle to meet its greenhouse gas goals. But I got to say, it's not all of us. When we set our targets, there was no way the government was the only actor in achieving those targets. We can green all our buildings and do all the stuff we want to do, green all the schools. But if you all don't get electric cars, if you're living in a house and you can't break the link to your gas stove or your gas furnace, then we will continue to consume more fossil fuels than we should, and we will struggle to reach our greenhouse gas goals. I talk about this, but I can also say that I did this. I pulled out my 6-year-old gas stove, replaced it with an induction stove, pulled out my perfectly good 6-year-old water heater, replaced it with an electric induction water heater. I've got solar panels on my roof, an electric car, and the only thing I've got left is a gas dryer because I cannot figure out how to run an electric line through my walls to get up to where that dryer is. But otherwise, if I'd had to find 240 line, I could do this. But anyway, it's important that all of us do something. So we can talk all we want about our goals, but you got to participate in this. So we're really asking people to say, what can I do to help us get to the place we're trying to get to? We are funding zero emission fleet of buses, and we have buses that are now all electric. We're going to have hydrogen buses. We're actually going to be creating hydrogen in Montgomery County. Whoever thought we were going to do that, but we're going to have multiple facilities that generate hydrogen here. And that's going to help us reach our goals. We have zero fares on ride-on, and we have bus rapid transit, which we are putting for the first time into the budget with a funding mechanism. The council has to approve it. But we're proposing to do what Northern Virginia does. Everybody likes to talk about Northern Virginia. I'll talk about Northern Virginia. They tax commercial property way higher than Montgomery County. And we've got to stop pretending that we're the most expensive place in the world, because we're not. You would probably shock you to know that you live in the county with the lowest tax rates of anybody around us, except for DC. You know, your taxes are $1.03. I will probably raise them to close to $1.09. That's what this calls for. If you lived in Frederick, or if you live in Frederick, you're paying $1.11. If you like Howard County, you're paying $1.34. If you like Fairfax County, you're paying $1.15. If you're commercial property in Fairfax County, you're paying $1.26. And if you're in Tysons, you're paying close to $1.50, as you are in Western Virginia. The only place cheaper than Montgomery County is the District of Columbia. Your residential taxes are only 85 cents there. And they performed that magic trick because the tax on commercial property is $1.89 compared to $1.03. So when someone says we can't raise taxes because we're too expensive, we are the cheap date. And what I tell people is if there was a race to the bottom, we won. We have the lowest taxes. We refuse to raise taxes. We do a bunch of stuff to give tax money away. Northern Virginia doesn't do that. So why are they going to Northern Virginia where they can pay $1.89 in commercial taxes when they could just pay $1.03 here? They go there because Northern Virginia took that money and they built infrastructure. The infrastructure attracted businesses. Businesses go where infrastructure is, where it looks like the government's willing and able to invest in things. And they looked at Montgomery County. We couldn't get our act together for almost 20 years. We cannot get the courage to say, you know, if we're going to build nice things, we have to invest in. And if we have to invest, we're going to need tax revenues, and we can actually do this without going after residents, but we've not been willing to do that. So I'm working on it, and we've got our first proposal in this budget that'll do something about it. We've established a racial equity and social justice office in Montgomery County. It actually works. And it has reshaped the way we look at budgets. You know, people now notice, gee, there's a lot of money going to a certain part of the county, and there doesn't seem to be anything going over here. And it's forced people to think about Where do you make your investments? How do you do it in a fair and equitable way? And I think we've been able to move in that direction. We've got our Vision Zero, which is, it's a tough thing. It's a very aspirational. You can't stop people from crossing mid-block in the middle of the night when nobody can see you, but you can make things as safe as possible. And so when you go around the county and you see all these little cones placed on these corners to square off the corners, this was something I asked when I first got elected. It was like, I saw this in DC, they were doing this. I realized I could no longer swing around the corner in DC because when it's at the right angle, you actually have to kind of slow down and make a more careful turn. And I asked our folks to start doing that because it was inexpensive, didn't require a lot of concrete, and it made it safer for pedestrians. That's one of the things we've been able to do, and I think it's really important. We've adopted a drone as first responder program. If you've seen our famous drones, we are actually able to, drones can get to the scene of a crime faster than a police officer can. So we've got a drone in Wheaton, one in Silver Spring, Bethesda, Germantown, Gaithersburg, more coming. And what they allow, they're on stationed on top of a building. If somebody gets a call, the drone usually gets there before a police officer does. They can survey, they can see who's doing something, and they can follow that person. And my favorite story about following somebody is following them to a bus and then telling the police what bus they got on, and the police taking them off to the next bus stop. So that's what the drone does. And what we're trying to do is let people know that we really don't want you to come to Montgomery County and commit crimes, and we're actually serious about it. So think about what we're willing to do that. The other good side of drones, and this is about public safety, they got a call from somebody saying somebody was waving a gun, and I think it was at a 7-Eleven. And they responded to that call. When police respond to a call about somebody waving a gun, how do you think they respond? Like they're going to deal with somebody with a gun. The drone got there first. The drone was able to get a picture of the person and said the person has a phone in their hand, not a gun in their hand. Totally different response. Nobody got shot. Nobody got harassed. It was just the opportunity you could talk to somebody rather than do something that you would later regret. So that's the good side of what the drones do. And it's something I really appreciate in that technology. We had hard choices, and I had pretty clear priorities about what I'm trying to do. We preserved core services, and we made strategic reductions. We had to look at our budget, and we had to look at things to get this budget to match. We found things we decided we could either do without, that we could trim a little bit, but we did not trim things that would go out and hurt people. I told my staff, when I realized that we were going to be making cuts, that don't bring me anything if there's a person on the other end of it that's going to get hurt. I don't want to go there. If I have to go there at the end, that's what I have to do, but I'm not going there if I don't have to. And we stayed away from that. So we've been able to maintain our core services, but save a little bit of money. This education investment, largest ever county contribution to MCPS. It's worth noting. It's going to make a difference. And, you need every teacher you can get in these classrooms. You need our class sizes to come back down to earth. We've got to do something about special education. So you will find 70 people in here to support the special education teachers. As somebody who has a special needs child and knows how difficult that can be when they're having a bad day, I appreciate the work you do. And because I was a teacher in a school that had a special education program, I got firsthand to see what it was like when kids were in my classroom and they didn't have an aide with them. It was very challenging. And so I appreciate the work you do. And I know it's important you have the support. And also we have to stop being legally vulnerable to getting lawsuits, because we get sued because people know they can come here and we're not able to meet our deadlines in terms of doing the reporting. And then they get to sue us and make us spend a lot of money for schools that we could otherwise provide here. We're going to make sure you've got the staff so your reports get done and you do not say we missed the 30-day deadline. Now we're in trouble. So we're going to make this as easy as possible for you going forward. Our efforts to support Vulnerable people with medical issues. Montgomery County has something very unique. It has a system of clinics. There is no other county that has a system of clinics. It's a primary healthcare system for the uninsured. Montgomery County has that, and it's really important. Thank you. My HHS staff appreciates that. And one of my favorite things about it is when I first started talking with people about this, when I first came in, I realized that the clinics don't coordinate. They don't know a lot of what anybody else does, and they're very disconnected from the hospitals. And the hospitals actually benefit from the clinics, because if people knew there were clinics and could go to the clinics where they are free, they wouldn't wind up in hospital emergency rooms. And so these clinics can help take the load off hospitals, but the hospitals weren't part and weren't talking about this. So they started making changes. And this week I got to go to a meeting with my people at HHS and the clinics and the hospitals, talking about how do we plan a path forward together so that you can make referrals. If you don't have a service, you know what other clinic has the service that you don't have. You can make these connections. The hospitals understand if they do a better job of helping us support clinics, those are people who aren't going to wind up at their doorsteps. So I'm really glad we got to this point. I'm sorry COVID interrupted a bunch of stuff we were trying to do, but COVID was really a bit of a beast. All that's led me to propose the tax increases we're going to need to support, particularly MCPS. So we're putting it in the budget as a school tax increase because it needs a majority of votes rather than 11 votes. So with a majority of votes, I think we can build a majority to fund this budget. It's a 6.3 cent tax increase, and it will not make us the most expensive place in the universe. And I'll show you that chart. We also created the Growth Opportunity Workforce Transportation and Housing Growth District. I don't do acronyms, but growth sounded pretty good. So whoever came up with that idea, I give you great credit for coming up with something that I'm not laughing at. It actually makes sense. It will do the things we wanted to do. We create opportunities for workforce, transportation, and housing. It's a good thing. And it's the first time, and it's going to tax primarily commercial property to pay for the infrastructure. Now the council still has to pass this, but if they pass it, it'll make us possible for the first time to build things without going to the general tax rate. And we will still have 10.6% reserves. We had a target of 10% in the county. It was never achieved. When I was on the council, we never got a bunch above 8, I think. We got as high as 17. So we've routinely been above 10 because we've made hard decisions. One of them was not to spend all the money when it comes in, so the money's actually left over and available when you're trying to balance a budget. That's what makes this year so hard. We would have been in good shape without the snow, and if our revenue projections hadn't tanked, which had nothing to do with anything we were doing, we probably could have gotten through this without a tax increase or much of a tax increase. But that was not our fate. Our fate was what it is. So here we are. There's a lot of pressure on our budget. The state budget continues to struggle, more so than even ours. The money that the governor thought they had turned out not to be there. That was a rude surprise. And that's, certainly created issues at the state level. Unfortunately, one of the issues it's created is they shift more of your pensions onto the county. So the county is, over 2 years is almost $30 million of pensions that we had no funding for that had to come out of the budget. That's like over a penny on the tax rate. And so that's new responsibilities with no new revenues. Federal policy changes are impacting county residents. The budget replaces $8.6 million that the feds aren't giving to the school system. We're worried about other cuts. We're very worried about the feds are going to go through with cutting Head Start program, because it would be incredibly painful to say goodbye to the Head Start program and incredibly expensive to figure out how to pay for it. So we're very concerned about what happens at the federal level and how it impacts us. Our revenues are volatile. There are a lot of people who have been laid off. We don't know whether Trump is done with laying people off, whether Congress who put money back in the budget if the departments are actually going to spend the money they were given. NIH was given more money than they had last year, but they fired a lot of people. So the question is, are those people going to get hired back to do the work they were doing? Because if they don't hire them back, they're not going to spend the money. We're not going to get the jobs, the revenue, or any of the other benefits that come out of that. Education funding pressures are still there, both the services, some which I talked about, but also the blueprint requirements. I'll be honest what I think about Blueprint. If I knew I couldn't fund the whole thing, which everybody I think knows they can't fund the whole thing, I would fund one thing first, which would be early childhood education. And I would do that until all the counties had early childhood education and all the parents who needed it could get it, because there is nothing in the Blueprint that would make as much difference for the outcomes of children than getting them when they're 2, 3, and 4 years old and making sure when they hit kindergarten, they know numbers, they're able to read a little bit, and they're ready to learn. When they come in, and I heard this, thank you. When I was a teacher, I remember the first time somebody said to me, you know, these kids coming in kindergarten, they're functioning at a 3-year-old level. And I just thought to myself, because I had kids, 3-year-old? I know the difference between a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. Their readiness to learn, the readiness to have access to concepts that a 5-year-old can actually grasp isn't in a 3-year-old. And it is very difficult to catch them up. And if you don't catch them up, you never make up the deficit. I was looking at research this week, and that even if you've got a well-intentioned, well-funded program for remediation, if they are not remediated by the time they leave kindergarten, they do not catch up. They may narrow the gap, but they don't catch up. So there's our opportunity is when these kids are 2, 3, and 4. That's the chance to get it right. And we would save a ton of money at the end of this cycle if we got it right at the beginning of the cycle. It's kind of like when we talk about crime. If we help kids in the beginning, we wouldn't be paying for what happens when they don't grow up right and we have to deal with them later. Education is the key to building a better society. I believe that, and that's why I believe in funding this budget. It is important. In making this budget, we're dealing with inflation. It's a real thing, and it's come down. But we've had some really high inflation, and it has driven up the cost of construction. Construction seems to still be more inflated than the general inflation rate, and that's putting a lot of pressure on the work we do. I've got this cute little chart that shows the evolving and growing needs in Montgomery County, just in case everybody still thinks we're Lake Wobegon. This shows, go back to that one. This is, the first one shows you the number of kids receiving free and reduced meals, up from under 40% to 43%. Number of people experiencing homelessness from about 1,000 down to about 800, and now back up to 1,500. Number of earned income tax credit recipients from about 40,000 to 57,000. And the change in DC area consumer price index, 30%. So there's a lot of pressure on people who don't have the means to address that pressure. This gives you an idea where our money goes. It's where we're addressing the needs of the community. You can see the list by color of the slides, what the different categories are. You can see the big dark blue side at the bottom, which is the public schools. You see the other nice blue side. Is that blue or is that some other name you've got for it? Anyway, it's blue to me. That's the Health and Human Services, and you can see that's a pretty substantial part of our budget now. There's all other government is that brown area, and then public safety is the other large chunk of money that comes out. And Montgomery College, Emmett, and Park and Planning, and the Judicial are those top little 3 things. But you can see where your money goes, and you can see how it's changed over time. Schools continue to be the largest recipient of money. We balanced this budget with $19 million in cuts. We're going to raise the income tax from 3.2 to 3.3, just so you understand the impact. If you're a teacher making $200,000, how many? I know. That's what I thought you'd say that. But if you were, it would cost you $200. If you're making $100,000, it's going to cost you $100. If you're making $80,000, it's $80. This is not a huge tax increase. We're not going to break anybody's back with this. And it's important. We need the revenues, and we've got to find ways to support this budget. And without the revenue, there can be really harmful service reductions, and it's not necessary. Weighted property tax rates remain lower than the neighboring counties. And that's this other cool slide. So you can see what I talked about earlier. Those are all the counties around us. There's Montgomery County, far left, and the lowest bars, the lowest blue bar except for DC, the lowest gray bar, which is commercial property, than everybody else. Nobody is as cheap as us. Nobody takes so little from the commercial sector. Nobody takes less than us. And so when someone says to you, you're going to hurt these businesses, just say, so why are they going to the places where the taxes are so much higher than Montgomery County? Rebut those arguments. Don't let people say that, because it's what the developers want you to say. It's what the developers want you to believe. They're not a reliable source of information. We are putting in a tax credit, so families that earn $40,000 or less taxable income won't be paying the increase in taxes. Even though it's not much money, it would be like $40 on a $40,000 tax. We felt these people are enough at the bottom that it's not worth trying to get more blood from a turnip. We should go easy on that. So they'll be out of it. We have other necessary revenue enhancements, recycling and resource management fees will either help us transition to long haul and modernizing our waste facilities so we don't burn this stuff, or it'll wind up spending a lot of money modernizing the incinerator, which we do not want to do. It's an environmental mess. It is yesterday's technology, and there are better things to do. We have water quality protection charge. It goes up. We have responsibilities for clean water. All the stuff we have to do on that gets more expensive. We are raising permitting fees. Our permitting fees are out of line, and permitting is the department that's supposed to be self-financing. So they need higher fees in order to pay the costs of operating the department. Fortunately, all the other places around us are also raising their fees for the same reason. And we're raising the use of money for using public facilities and a 911 fee increase that lets us pay for our communities, our communications center, call center personnel, which are ceasing to be fire department workers. They're going to go back doing trucks and what they were hired to do. And we're going to have civilians in there. And we're going to have that growth district. We have 2 growth districts. The taxes won't come into effect now. If the council passes that, it would be up to a 0.75% tax on all property in the county, but a 15-cent tax along the corridors where they're building bus rapid transit. And the tax would only be on commercial property within a half mile of these corridors. So it's only commercial on the 15 cents. And that would still make them cheaper than it is in Fairfax. So they still have room to run. And you can see the lines we were going to do just real quickly. It's on 355, the central portion and the south portion, basically going from Friendship Heights, or actually Bethesda up to beyond Gaithersburg, and New Hampshire Avenue. And New Hampshire Avenue is important because a lot of people are trying to go to DC. They come down New Hampshire. They make New Hampshire a mess in the morning. If any of you suffer with that. And then a lot of them swing to DC. We want to catch them there and bring them to be able to take them to the Fort Totten station and get that traffic off of Colesville Road, which is a mess. This is the recommended budget. You can see the functions. MCPS, slow down. And MCPS is on the right there, and the college is at the bottom, and you can see the chunk that public safety takes. The rest of the budget is smaller than public safety. And then there's debt service, your pensions, and the amount of money we put cash into the budget. Next, the total MCPS's total budget is $3.8 billion. The county funding increases $179 million, almost $180 million. It funds the teachers and support staff salaries, reduces class size, additional funds to improve and support special education, $6.3 million for those language programs and math curriculum, and 28 security officers for the elementary school. This is the second tranche of the elementary school security officers. So we exceed maintenance of effort by $202 million. The blueprint increases are 12.1 million, and per pupil funding grows by $1,300. And next is my favorite chart. I've been using this. I've been doing these budget presentations to the community ever since I got elected. And you can see, like say, take that gray line. The dotted gray line goes back to 2010. That's when we spent the most per pupil in the county. We were spending $24,000 in 2010 on pupils. Recession hits, and watch that dotted line just drop. And it drops and it drops and it drops. And then we're back up to $24,439 this year. We are now higher than we were before. Part of it is the state. $1,000 of that is the state. The state has stepped up to do more things, which is nice considering they load all the stuff on top of us. So it's good they give us some money. The county's share is back up from as low as, where we were at 17,000 in 2010, adjusted for inflation. And now we're back up to 16,000 from the county. So we've come a long way. Look at the slope of the curve. You go from 2019, which is when I come in, to now, and you see that curve takes a very different direction than it did before. So one of the things I wanted to get done, to get spending back here. When people say our schools aren't like they used to be, well, if you're spending thousands of dollars less per pupil than you spent before, what do you expect to happen? And so restoring these investments to kids is, again, really important. I reiterate that thing over and over again. Kids, education, it matters. Early childhood, 4% for early care and education, 500,000 to accelerate the scholarships and getting kids off the waiting list into the Working Parents Assistance Program, and early childhood literacy and learning resources at Noyes Library. Noyes Library will actually reopen. And there are a lot of people over there who are very happy about that, particularly in the neighborhood. And ending services to end and prevent homelessness. We're increasing funding for our SHARP program, which gets people out of hotels and into permanent housing. The hotels are way more expensive. There's $2 million for overflow emergency shelter, and more money for an adult shelter, and more money for street outreach programs. We have a serious homeless problem in Montgomery County because of the pressures I talked about. It's not getting any better. Rising rents, which are exceeding inflation for many people, making this even more difficult. So we are doing what we can. You know, I've told people I got back from Los Angeles in December. I spent a week out there, and you get to see what happens when you do not have adequate programs for homelessness, and you're in downtown and you watch what it looks like and look at how it feels. And it's like, we're determined not to have that here. We're never going to get rid of homelessness, but we can certainly provide the services and more support so that the impact on the broader community is minimal. That's one thing I've focused on. If I can make it go away, I would. But in lieu of that, I'm at least going to make it as not visible and not present as we can possibly be. And that's the work we're going to try to do. We're going to build a healthier community. Yay, we're putting money into all these programs that lost state and federal money. And we're improving the reimbursement rate for Montgomery Cares. They're going to go from 45% to 52.5%. Reimbursement means they weren't getting paid for the full cost of the services they provide us. We're not going to get there, but 45% has put those agency or organizations in jeopardy. And if they go away, there goes our first line of healthcare for people who have no healthcare. So that's important to keep that. We're providing 2.5% increase for adult medical daycare. A lot of adults rely on this. It's really important. And, the centers don't get reimbursed at the full cost of care by Medicaid or Medicare. And so plugging that gap is important. A lot of families struggle. So this helps these folks. If they raise their rates, they lose the patients. We're giving them a boost so they can pay better wages to keep people working there. Same thing with the all the nonprofits are getting a 2.5% increase, inflation adjustment this year. And my favorite program that's not directly human-centered, but I guess it is one-stop access to county services. We are creating a single portal where no matter what door you enter, whether it's a housing door, a healthcare door, if you're doing anything with the county, or you're in a clinic, you can sign up for the county wherever you are. and you get access to whatever services we have. A social worker working with you wherever they see you can take your information and then say, let's see, you're here for housing. Let's see if there are any programs you qualify in HHS. We've never been able to do that. We send people from one door, say on Hungerford Drive, to go to the health department. I can send you down Rockville Pike to go to the housing department, and over to Picard Drive for something else. This puts everything where you can get it in one place. It makes access easier, and it helps people connect with each other. We continue Head Start contractual nurse staffing, and we're increasing funds for the senior nutrition program to account for increased food costs. Affordable housing, $157 million more to expand affordable housing, including capital funding of $100 million and $64 million in new funding for preservation and production. We take affordable housing seriously. I hate it when I listen to people in the state who thinks, oh, you don't like affordable housing. Nobody spends what we spend on affordable housing. We are deliberate about it. And one thing we've done more of these projects ourselves, either our projects or our projects with partners, relying less on getting 15% of what a developer builds and putting our money into projects where we can determine how much we get. We built a 200-unit affordable complex that included ownership on Veers Mill Road and Randolph Road. That never would have come from the private sector. It only became because the government said, we need to do this and we're going to do it. And next one, public safety investments. The fire department is doing great. Their recruitment is holding up, and we're giving them, money to refurbish some of their equipment and maintain emergency medical service logistics, all these things which are really valuable. We've got 37 stations in the county and 2 rescue stations. The police department still has a recruiting issue, but we are managing, for example, their pay. They are now decently paid comparative to other jurisdictions. And we're dealing with the requirements to become a police officer. We had a requirement, you had to have 60 credits. You didn't have to have 60 credits in almost any other department. So we were losing people who said, I'd like to be a police officer. I don't have any credits. I'm not going to wait 2 or 3 years, because if you're part-time, by the way, and trying to work, you're not going to get your 60 credits in 1 or 2 years. You're probably looking at 3 or 4. I'm not waiting. I'm going to another department. The University of Maryland, working with our police department, determined that the program we do for training recruits coming in, that makes them eligible for 60 credits, that the education they're getting is worth 60 credits. And so they're going to get 60 credits, which means I can hire somebody saying, when you're finished with the training, you will have met our 60 credit requirement, and we can bring them on staff. That's going to help come in. And the other thing is the state's going to get rid of this very stupid rule that says if you smoke marijuana in the last 3 years, you can't be a police officer. Yeah, it's legal now, in case anybody noticed that. And so that law is going to be changed. You could go to Fairfax County, you could smoke yesterday and be a police officer. So we're going to have some sense here. Yes, like everybody else, you get drug tested if you do something wrong. If we have reason to think that you're driving or you had an accident and you have reason to believe you might be under the influence, you treat it like alcohol. And that's the way you should do it. So we're going to get modernized. And we think those 2 things are going to help us recruit people, because there are a lot of, doing marijuana isn't the worst thing anybody did. And to say you can't ever become a police officer in Montgomery County, but you could almost any place else, is just nonsensical. Nobody seems to be having issues with that. And I'd say our police department does a pretty good job. They are improving their speed cameras and red light cameras, and everybody hates it, but it actually, people are driving worse and worse. And I feel like there's some need to kind of stop that. It is crazy to watch the speeds that some people drive on and running red lights, which also amazes me. I never saw it as bad as it's gotten now. So we're putting money into that. We also have the external defibrillators. You have to replace them. It's one of those expenses that's a lot, but you have to replace them every so many years. Lucky us, this is the year we've got to replace them. So we're replacing them. Our corrections and rehabilitation, they got a K-9 unit. And obviously, because still have issues inside the jail with people bringing stuff in. But what's really cool about that department is we've got a bakery program, And it is really cool. People get trained in the bakery program, get jobs. And they got closed down during the Great Recession. And I brought it back when I got elected. I wanted that program back because those people got training. They could walk out of that bakery program and get jobs. And now the program's back, they're getting jobs. I'm hoping they expand it to full catering. I really want them to be able to go out and bring people meals and get more bucks back into them so that they can actually benefit from that and have more job opportunities. And we have full-time instructors for educational and training programs there. And, again, that's important. I'll tell you, our jail is probably the best jail in the country. And, as much as you don't want to like a jail, it's good to have a jail where you feel like the purpose of the jail is to help people recover rather than prove how mean you can be and how much you can punish them. Punishment doesn't work very well. It doesn't work well with kids, doesn't work well with adults. Giving them a path back to society is much better. And, in the long term, we've got to figure out about how do you expunge things from people's records. Because I always tell people, it may seem like you only got a 1-year sentence, but if you're going out for a job or trying to rent an apartment, it's a life sentence. And so we've got to think, do we really want to saddle people with permanent disability, inability to get a job? If they get their life straight, shouldn't there be a way of mitigating that impact of having that record? Because that record serves no other purpose than to hurt people. Our emergency management office continues to get less federal support. We'll fill some of those holes. Everbridge is a project that is I think you guys know Alert Montgomery, and it's our emergency notification system. We have specialized equipment that includes communication tools, and we're replacing the shock trauma kits. And, they came into play at the recent shooting. These kits with the bleed stop are lifesavers. They also run out they go stale every 3 years. So we have to replace kits as they age. But they actually make a difference. We have seen them make a difference in Montgomery County. So I'm glad we have that program. And we also have our nonprofit security grant program, or houses of worship, and some nonprofits like Planned Parenthood get additional protection so that they can't be victimized by terrorists who are trying to attack people who are either practicing their religion or operationalizing their rights as a woman. Just because you do that should not put you under attack. So I'm really glad that we fund that. On transportation, we've got zero fare ride-ons. The bus service in Burtonsville is going to expand to all day. The flex service is going to serve Damascus and Poolsville. I hear a lot of people up there are going to be very excited. Our traffic enforcement for a dedicated bus lane on Georgia Avenue, which is a big deal for us. And we continue to update and enhance our sidewalks and signals. And for modernization of our bus fleet, we're going to have hydrogen fueling and a solar microgrid at the Gaithersburg Bus Depot. And the workforce, we have $3.4 million in WorkSource Montgomery. If any of you have experienced WorkSource Montgomery, they do really good job training. They're a far cry from what they were when I came into office. We've got almost $600,000 for the BioHub Training Center. And we've got a lot of money for economic development in the Economic Development Corporation. They've got new leadership there. They've set out a new direction, and I really like what they're doing. And we put in $4 million for county incubators and entrepreneurs that are in the incubators, and $5 million investment in the Institute for Health Computing. And climate and environment, we continue to work to shut down the transfer station and modernize it. We've got funds for Tree Montgomery. We continue to fund electrification and climate resilience. And our goals remain the same, and we're supporting an equitable build out of vehicle charging station. You're going to see more and more charging stations. Has anybody ever been in turtle mode? Anybody know what turtle mode is? I am probably the only person who's been in turtle mode. I've been in turtle mode several times in my car. That's when you're driving and you forgot to get your car charged, and you think you're going to get to the charging station, and the car suddenly says you're not going faster than 15 miles an hour, and you've got 2-mile range left. That's turtle mode. And one of my cars actually had the turtle appear on your dashboard. We fully fund Montgomery College's $6.3 million request, 4.2% increase over 26. 4% for park and planning, enough to fund their compensation package, funds for the Office of the People's Council, which the council has never passed, but we're going to try to get the council to pass it again, because when residents go up against developers, they have to hire very expensive attorneys if they can find one. And we used to have a People's Council, and the council got rid of it. And every year I bring it back and say, it's time you bring it back. We're going to support WSSC's fees. We're increased our payment to municipalities by $3.7 million. And all our nonprofit contracts across county government got a 2.5% increase, so their workers can try to keep pace with inflation. And that is everything. Thank you all.
Well, I mean, for this solution.
Afterwards?
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Once again, thank you everybody for coming, and a special shout out to the Office of Management and Budget for their work.
Yeah.
I'm pleased to tell you, take the rest of the day off. Thank you all very much.